It's great to be here with all of you today. I'd like to start off by asking a question. How many of you consider yourselves a leader? Chances are, each and every one of you have either been placed in a situation that required you to lead, or is currently in a leadership role. If neither is true, I can almost guarantee that whether by choice or by chance, the remainder of us will all be called upon to lead through a situation at some point in the future. Be it to plan a family gathering or an office social, or being asked to head a project or chair a meeting, or for some, to lead troops on the front lines of combat. At some point in our lives, we'll all be called upon to lead. Sometimes the responsibilities of leadership can add a degree of discomfort and stress to an otherwise busy and already hectic life. When dealing with family matters or work requirements, unbearable traffic, intolerable commute times, paying the bills and saving for the future. In this context, hectic is the new normal for the average person. Add to that the demands of being placed in a leadership role, and a whole new dimension of stress is added to the normalcy that we just might be getting used to. What if I told you that it is entirely possible to lead effectively? Not just lead because you have to or because the job demands it, but truly lead effectively. To lead in such a way that you can end each day knowing that you made the best possible decisions, and in doing so, made a difference for the people you are entrusted with leading. My name is Johnny Wandasan, and I'd like to offer you an idea that can make this prospect a reality, even under seemingly difficult circumstances. The idea is simple. To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. Okay, I'll admit, that was a mouthful and it sounds complex, but at the core of this idea is a very basic notion. I would even venture to say that it's innate. There is an instinctive wonder or curiosity that we have about the unfamiliar, and in some cases, the unknown. And there adds a degree of comfort and certainty when these unknowns are made familiar. Why is that? It's because when we understand the concept, event, or person, we are then able to cognitively relate to that experience. And that's just it. To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. To lead effectively, we need to first understand ourselves, truly understand ourselves, and do the same for others. You see, it's only after we identify and understand not just our own strengths and opportunities for improvement. It's when we dig below the surface of these two layers that we find what really drives us. Our hopes, our fears, our passions, our desires. At the very heart, what resides below these two layers is the very essence of what we do and why we do it. And it guides our actions, whether consciously or unconsciously. How many of you know what that is? To lead effectively, we must first truly know ourselves. To lead effectively, we need to build our emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? Broadly speaking, the term emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to recognize one's own emotions and the emotions of others, and to discern between these to make sense of them appropriately. Honing this ability enables highly effective decision-making and execution. The term emotional intelligence made its first public appearance in a 1964 paper by Michael Beldoch and gained popularity in a book published in 1995 by well-known author, psychologist, and now blog writer, Dr. Daniel Goleman. So far, I've mentioned the word emotion no less than 8 times, and I perceive some uneasiness in the audience. Yeah, I got you. I can tell by the body language and eye contact, or lack of eye contact, that the topic of emotions is not comfortable for some of you. Consider this. Emotion is not weakness. Emotion is strength. It is the fabric of personal relationships which warrior leader General Retired Stanley McChrystal once described as the sinew that holds the force together. For those of you familiar with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the third dimension of an individual's personality preference deals with thinking and feeling. That is, some people prefer to make decisions primarily through emotions, while others prefer to make decisions primarily through logic. Notice how he used the word prefer. We are all capable of experiencing and understanding emotions, but we each individually prefer to display or respond to emotions that may not always be consistent. And this could be due to a number of factors, ranging from, among others, the time of day, the behaviors of others, and yes, ourselves individually, and what we're going through physiologically. To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. Effective leaders are aware of themselves and are adept at managing their own emotions, words, and deeds accordingly, all with a keen sense of others in order to produce the best possible outcome. Every interaction, be it email, text message, phone call, or face-to-face, every interaction counts. So earlier I described reactions to the unfamiliar and the unknown as being a curiosity. How many of you here experience a different reaction? Okay. For those of us with our hands up, how many of you experience fear? Yep. Fear affects us in the most primal way. In one of his lectures, Dr. Jack Kim, Associate Dean at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, described how a response to fear results in fluids pooling in the extremities of the body. And I experienced that phenomenon before coming on stage today, but that's beside the point. The point is, and I'm not a doctor and I cannot precisely tell you what parts of the brain is responsible for this and in what order these parts respond, though I suspect some of you here in the audience could likely help me out. The point is, our instinctive reaction to fear is one of three things: to flee, to fight, or to freeze. And as a leader, it would be very unleaderly to flee, fight, or freeze in response to a situation involving a member of your team or in response to a tough decision. To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. Be aware of yourself. Know and understand the situation, then take the appropriate action. Now is a good time to clarify that in a moment of survival, our reactions will be driven by learned behavior, which is guided by the habits we form during training. Whether it be life-saving skills, marksmanship skills, or response to emergency procedures, and so forth, our response will be instinctive based on the habits we form through training. But most decisions we encounter as a leader will not require an instinctive survival response. We usually have a little bit of time to think through these. Some use this time wisely, while others will default to making rash decisions. Often, the biggest challenge faced when making important decisions is the fear of the unknown, the fear of the outcome. To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. Effective leaders identify this emotional response, the fear of the unknown and the fear of the potential outcomes, and take the time to rationalize. Right? Think through the process in order to make the best possible decisions for themselves, their subordinates, and their organization. Not necessarily in that order, though, and not limited to these either. Many of us rightfully consider our families and loved ones in this equation as well. A hot button topic in the realm of leadership is that of ethics. Great leaders falling on the sword of their not so great acts. One has to wonder, to what extent were these once great leaders aware of their emotions and the layers I spoke of earlier, their passions, their desires, their purpose? Did they truly know themselves well enough to apply the self-control necessary to make the best decision, to lead effectively? To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. Effective leaders are aware of and in control of their emotions and their actions. Effective leaders also have a keen sense of the emotions being experienced and expressed by others, sometimes even before a word is uttered. The old saying, actions speak louder than words, hold true here. effective leaders can perceive a shift in a person's mood or emotions simply by observing their body language. A conversation may validate this initial assessment as a person's emotions can become more evident through verbal cues such as word choice and tone of voice. Now, leaders are not required to take on the emotions that their people are experiencing. That would be exhausting. Could you imagine what a day would be like of cycling through all the emotions of the people you interacted with would be like? Rather, leaders need to be aware of and understand these emotions to make sense of the unique situations of others, then decide and act accordingly. Leaders are responsible for making sense of the circumstances, understanding what they are experiencing within themselves and what other people are experiencing and expressing in any given situation. You see, effective leaders manage the emotional bandwidth of their teams at all times while determining the best possible outcomes and the best ways to achieve them. To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. All right, I see that I've gained back some of your trust and interest in my talk. So at this point, some of you might be wondering, well, okay, how do I build emotional intelligence? Unfortunately, I have to confess, one of the biggest criticisms of emotional intelligence is that there is no universal consensus in the scientific community that emotional intelligence is a real form of intelligence. As such, there's no standard rubric really for how to measure or even how to achieve emotional intelligence. What's for certain is that dealing with emotions is not simple. It's complex stuff. What I can offer you, however, is that emotional intelligence is rooted in empathy. And taking the time to perceive and understand emotions goes a long way. Being attuned to emotions, and I'm referring to our own as well as others. Being attuned to emotions will improve our ability to understand ourselves, to manage our own behaviors, to understand others, and improve our ability to maintain beneficial working relationships and make sound decisions. Empathy begets empathy. Leaders who lead with empathy set the foundation for a culture of empathy characterized by empathetic followership and leadership in their formations and in their organizations. Building emotional intelligence takes conscious and deliberate effort. To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. The time you invest in reflection on understanding yourself and applying empathy will yield compounding returns over time. Now and in the future, we will all be turned to for leadership in some capacity. And if you make the wrong decisions under the right circumstances, you risk not being there for the people you lead. Let me say it another way. If you do not lead effectively, you risk not being there for the people who need you most. Leadership's not easy. We'll have good days and not so good days. We won't always have the right information when we need it. And there will no doubt be some very long days. And we'll occasionally need to take a knee to gather our senses. But we're never leading alone. I'd like to end with a quote by retired General McChrystal. He said, "If you're a leader, the people you've counted on will help you up. And if you're a leader, the people who count on you need you on your feet." To lead effectively, build your emotional intelligence. Thank you.